everybody, and welcome to the Bob Stoops app. I'm Brad McMullen along with Hall of Fame football coach Bob Stoops. And Coach, we're almost to August. We're getting, the countdown is here for college football.
Yeah, Brad, and we'll be getting more content out now that the season's coming. It's a little bit slow here in the summer. At least we have the Olympics coming up. That'll be fun and exciting. But yeah, good to be back with you, and can't wait for the fall. What a year this is going to be for football, college football, with the new leagues, new teams in the leagues, with the new Big Ten, adding the West Coast teams, the SEC adding OU and Texas. So really going to be interesting just to watch it. The Big 12 is going to be interesting to watch.
Yes.
To me, there's so much parity between all of those teams. So it's going to be a great year of football, definitely.
All right, let's go off script here. We're talking about the parity. What are you looking at in the Big Ten? Who do you think should be the favorite this year going in?
Well, I believe in Sharon Moore, the head coach at Michigan. Played for me here at OU, has been the O coordinator there at Michigan. I know everybody's not back for them on the coaching staff except Jim Harbaugh. A few other guys have left, but overall, I think their culture's still the same. Their attitude and the way they play, all of that matters because Sharon Moore was part of that and building that in the last many years. So I believe he'll carry it on. But I like always, I think it'll come down to that Ohio State-Michigan game. But now they may have to play again in the Big Ten championship, right? Because there isn't divisions.
Correct.
So it'll be. I think it'll come down to those two because Ryan Day. It sounds like I really believe in him as a coach, but also from what everyone says, the recruiting and the portal, the players that they have, they believe they're better than everybody. So it'll be those two, and that's usually the case.
Yeah, I love Ohio State. I think they are loaded with talent. Having a chance to talk with some of their coaches, they are really excited about the season. But about Michigan, have you ever seen a national champion, an undefeated national champion, get such little hype in the preseason coming into, as a returning champ?
Yeah, I guess, when you look at J.J. McCarthy, when the quarterbacks leave, that matters usually. Blake Corum, I believe it is, right? Yep. The great running back as well. So maybe it's the turnover with players, and let's face it, losing Jim Harbaugh, that's going to affect your program. So I could see that to some degree. And let's face it, I don't care what anybody says. Ryan Day's a great coach, and he's done a great job at Ohio State. So to your point, with the talent they have, maybe they ought to be the favorite. But with Michigan, though, you just got to believe that what they've done the last 3 years, they've built a heck of a culture there.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and obviously with Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA entering the mix there too, some great things for the fans to win on. All right, the SEC, obviously we love the Oklahoma Sooners. We believe the Sooners are a contender. Who else do you like in the SEC going in?
Yeah, that's you always had to say Alabama when Nick Saban's there, and nothing against Coach DeBoer. I don't really know him, and he's done a phenomenal job at Washington ahead of this. But you just believe, again, just like Michigan losing Harbaugh, that I know the culture's there as a program, but a lot of new coaches and a new head coach. So, that's got to disrupt them to some degree, maybe in the first year. I don't believe it will long term. I believe he's a great coach. So I'd go with, of course, Georgia and Kirby Smart, who's had it rolling the last several years. And again, I keep saying culture has built a really tough, strong culture in the way they compete. And until they start getting knocked off, you gotta go with them.
Yeah, and you look at Alabama and what they had built up over the last 15 years under Coach Saban. Last year, they won a few games razor thin. That South Florida game was scary. The Auburn game, the play in the back of the end zone when everybody thought that game was over.
Exactly.
I mean, it wasn't like they were actually manhandling people in those games. And a lot of people thought Nick Saban did his best coaching job last year, getting them to the college football playoff. There's a lot of change there in Tuscaloosa this year.
Yeah, that's a great point. You forget about the really tight games, and they're going to complete that ball against Auburn, one out of 20 times, but they did.
Yep.
So in the end, yeah, maybe they have a few cracks, and now with the coaching turnover, you got to think it's got to give them, take a year or two for them to catch their stride.
And you follow the recruiting, you know Georgia is stacked again. Georgia, a very good football team, did not get the opportunity to play in the college football playoff last year. How do you think the Bulldogs will bounce back this year?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, they weren't far from it a year ago. And again, Kirby Smart and the coaching staff that he has, they've really just got a strong, team continuity. All of it, the culture they built, all of it doesn't go away. And they're recruiting to it. That's the other part. You can get away from it and have some down years if maybe some recruiting classes or quarterback hadn't come through like you thought they might, but it doesn't seem like that's happened with them.
All right, let's talk about the Auburn Tigers. Expectations high for Auburn, like they are every year, a fan base that really wants to win at the highest level. Hugh Freeze has proven that he can win in the SEC with Ole Miss. He proved it at Arkansas State. He proved it at Liberty. But this is a whole different ball game in the SEC. What is a realistic expectation for the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, that's hard to say. This with this new look of the whole SEC, but I think they're a good program, but I don't put them in the upper tier in my opinion. They're going to have to do that at some point, but and they haven't. They've won, but not at a high. Not at a 10, 12 win, 10, 11 win season, and so so I'm going to reserve my praise on them.
Yeah, we'll see how they do. They played obviously very well against Alabama at the end of the season. Looked like they were able to do some good things, but again, let's see if they continue those building blocks. A team that I'm interested in seeing, Tennessee Volunteers. This was a team 2 years ago that caught the nation's eye when they beat Alabama, had all this great momentum at the end of the year. Last year, they kind of came back to earth, but still have done some wins on the recruiting trail. The team is building up. Obviously, you're familiar with Coach Heupel. What should be the expectation of the Tennessee Volunteers this year?
Yeah, I think they're going to be strong. Obviously, our first SEC game right here in Norman, Oklahoma. So that'll be exciting for everybody. But, they've done a good job. When Josh Heupel took that job, I thought this is going to take a while, because of the recruiting penalties and what had happened ahead of Coach Heupel being there, So I just thought, this is going to be, because usually all those effects of penalties take effect 2, 3, 4 years later.
That's right.
But they've overcome them. He and his staff have really done a great job putting together strong teams. Beat Alabama a couple years ago. I forget what they were a year ago. I think 9, 10 wins.
Yeah, they had a great year.
Yeah, so I would think they'd be at the same or trying to push to be even better than that.
Yeah, and expectations obviously in Death Valley with LSU always high. They're losing a Heisman Trophy quarterback, but they've recruited very well. Brian Kelly, they believe this could be their year.
Yeah, but quarterbacks matter so much when if you don't have another Heisman Trophy one right in back of them like we did for so many years between Baker, Kyler Murray, and then Jalen Hurts, it's not easy. And I think Daniels was a special player a year ago to win the Heisman Trophy in that field of players. I think that's going to affect them, more than maybe people want to let on.
All right, we talked about how Michigan's not getting a lot of attention as the defending national champion. One team that's getting a whole lot of attention this year, nothing really new, the University of Texas. But if you really look back at their season last year, they had some games, Wyoming there a little bit. You had some struggles with Kansas State at the end. I mean, when Kansas State went for 2, they lost to Oklahoma. I know a lot of people don't believe that, but they actually lost to Oklahoma. 7 out of 10 times they've lost to the Sooners. Do you buy into the hype that Texas is legitimately one of the top 5 teams in the country?
I'd say top 10, as I believe OU is. Again, like you just said, everyone forgets. They had a great year a year ago. We beat them.
Yep.
And we were, we're a game away from us being in the Big 12 championship against them. Actually, a player or two away from that happening. So that's how it was. But
a possible bad no call on Drake Stoops in the end zone. I'm not bringing up the Oklahoma State game, but there you go.
But agreed. We beat them a year ago. So in a neutral site. And there's nothing fluke about it. We went down and scored when we had to win the game. And so point being, we'll see. They've got an experienced quarterback. I keep talking about quarterbacks. They matter.
Yep.
And when you got good
Yours is
experience
good.
there. So in the end, I think they're a top 10 program, but I also believe OU is.
I think we're going to know a lot about Texas early. They're going to be playing the Michigan Wolverines, right off the bat there in the first 2 weeks of the season. I think we're going to know a lot about Michigan, too. If Michigan shows up and plays really well, then we're going to have a better understanding of both of those teams.
I have found the whole how comical one team, Texas, is ready and built ready for the SEC, but we're not. OU isn't.
And we beat them the year before.
Seven of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Not once or twice, right? And we beat them a year ago.
Yes.
So that kind of debate to me makes no sense.
Yeah, and it wasn't like we were 1-4 when we beat the Texas Longhorns. We were undefeated when we beat Texas. And again, going back to those 2 losses that OU had in the regular season, you're talking a combined point total of 7 points for those 2 losses.
Exactly.
Both of them road games, both of them without Danny Stutzman. And that is a big-time defensive player that Oklahoma hopes to have healthy the entire year this year.
Yeah, definitely. That's, so we're not far off or whatever. Again, that debate and that whole discussion is, to me, nonsense.
All right, and now let's talk about the Oklahoma Sooners. Jackson Arnold, a lot of excitement around this kid locally. Nationally, they're like, Oklahoma doesn't have a quarterback. Oklahoma's quarterback went to Oregon. They're in a lot of trouble going into the SEC. You got to love the fact that people are really underestimating the Sooners.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you. I think, he's a talented guy. Out of high school, he's a number 1 recruit in the country. I mean, this guy could throw the ball, run with the football. Everyone talks the bowl game. We had 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions. One was a perfect ball right to a receiver that went through his hands. So that's not on the quarterback.
No.
And if we score there, we're going, or we get down into scoring position, we're going up 17 or 21 at that point in the second half. So
with a whole new offensive line for that game as well.
Exactly. So point being, I think Jackson Arnold is going to have a great year. We've had that happen to us before. With the emergence of Sam Bradford in his first year.
Yeah.
He did okay. So anyway, point being, when a talent is talent, and I really believe this guy has what it takes.
Going to be a lot of fun, again, watching college football this far. Let's talk about some of the headlines that are out there. Matt Rule says that the Big Ten deserves 4 teams every year in the college football playoff. Do you think that should be the case? Do you think the SEC should get 4 automatic berths when you're talking about the talented teams in both of those conferences?
Yeah, sure. Well, if the Big Ten deserves it, for sure the SEC does.
I would agree.
I think everyone would contend that the SEC is still a stronger overall conference. They may have a couple more teams, but you have to look at all of them, and who do you not mind playing and who do you not want to play. And I think the SEC has more of those you don't want to play. But in the end, we'll see. I think some years that may be the case. Some years it may not, depending on how, what the scores of games look like and who lost to who and, on and on. But I do believe at this point right now, both those leagues, the SEC and the Big Ten, are by far and away stronger than any of the other conferences. So they deserve some kind of, grace when it comes to picking the teams.
Yeah, schedule is brutal and amazing. And I will say this, if the College Football Playoff Committee does what they are tasked to do, to put the 12 best teams in the college football playoff, I think you're going to have at least 4 from the SEC and probably 4 from the Big Ten each and every year, if they do their job.
It could be that way. Again, it's just kind of what other leagues, what happens, and with all of that, and so we'll see. This first year with 12 teams, I am too. I'm kind of trying to wrap my brain around it. 4 teams in a conference, going to the playoffs. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, which team's hot? When do they play? Injuries, all those things that matter when you're coming through that. All right, let's talk about some other big headlines out there. Najee Canaday, the star pitcher for Stanford, the National Player of the Year in women's softball, is getting paid, folks, big time. As they announced yesterday, Texas Tech She'll make over $1 million a year playing for the Red Raiders because of her NIL agreement. Congratulations to her. This is going to be a ripple effect for all different sports. If a softball player, right, is making that much money and making that big of a difference to a program, where does this mean for football? What does this mean for basketball? And this is just the beginning, as you probably will see softball players making even more money down the road.
Yeah, but I think there's a little difference there when you look at a pitcher in baseball or in softball compared to a quarterback who's on the field, well, I guess they're out there with 8 other players. Football's out there with 10, but I just believe a pitcher controls the game so much more than a quarterback or any one person can in a football game or a basketball game. Maybe a little more in basketball. Guys like, Michael and LeBron can control a basketball game too. So, but I don't think football fits that category. Where baseball and softball, you get somebody on that mound that they can't touch. Those outfielders don't have to do much, But again, the interesting part that you and I were talking about earlier, now she's making more than the coach, but that's going to start happening with a lot of different players and coaches. I've been saying all year, we're in a pro model now with college athletics. And in the pro model, the players make a lot more than the coach in about every sport. So that being said, I mean, we need to keep evolving into a pro model with contracts and with salary caps all of that needs to be, brought under one umbrella, just like NFL teams do, just like pro baseball does, on and on. And maybe it'll keep pushing its way that way.
And talking about Texas Tech, they've never, ever been to a Women's College World Series. And by adding her to the roster, you're probably expecting them to get there because Stanford was the worst hitting team in the Pac-12 last year, and they went to the College World Series.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You get somebody that can dominate the mound. That's, like I said, usually the rest of your fielders, they're going to go into the locker room pretty clean after the game. They didn't have to dive for many balls.
All right, so, hypothetical, if you're a girl on the Texas Tech roster, you're obviously ecstatic that you're getting arguably one of the greatest pitchers in the last 5 years to play the game of women's softball. But you're also sitting there going, man, she's making over $1 million. And I may be making $0 on top of my scholarship. Do you ever see a point where some of these players get together and say, hey, coach, it's February. We've got our first game next week. We're just going to sit out unless somebody ups the ante on us. I mean, these are interesting things. You can't do this in pros, right? Because they just go get different players. But in college, you have to have a student athlete that's playing. I mean, these are things that are in flux right now.
That's a fair point. I hadn't thought of that, but sure. Yeah, I've thought of the chaos and disruption in a locker room. It might, but as far as players, boycotting or not playing, that can happen, I guess. So we're going to see this whole new world just keeps evolving and changing, and we'll see where it goes. But the other part of that is they're probably going to be happy to go, if they can, go to the World Series, that they've never been to. So I don't know. I guess there's always a little give and take, but there's a lot to manage when in a locker room like that when all the money goes to one person.
That's going to be interesting. Well, congratulations to her and, of course, the Texas Tech Red Raiders for landing such a superstar pitcher. Can't wait for football season. Remember, for videos anytime, just tap on our video link. For Hall of Fame football coach Bob Stoops, I'm Brad McMullen.